It's no secret drugs are a huge problem in communities all across America, including right here in Maine. Our next guest believes the so-called war on drugs is actually hurting communities instead of helping them. And today he's sharing that message to folks here in Maine. Retired police captain Peter Christ joins us now live from Winthrop this morning. Peter, welcome to Good Day Maine, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
And Peter, you know, as a law enforcement, a retired law enforcement officer, you must be met with a lot of skeptics when you travel around the country with this message. Was it hard for you to actually, you know, come to this conclusion, judging, you know, coming from your background?
Well, actually, it makes it a little bit easier. In fact, you'd be amazed at the support. What we at LEAP do is we separate the two problems from each other. We separate the drug problem, the use and abuse of these very dangerous substances, from the crime and violence problem that's associated with the underground marketplace that we as a society have created by choosing a policy of prohibition to deal with our drug problem rather than a policy of regulation and control. And once people understand that separation of the two problems, then they start to understand a little bit more clearly what we're talking about at LEAP.
Okay, and Peter, explain why the war on drugs is actually hurting our communities, because I know a lot of law enforcement agencies invest a lot of money in hiring, you know, drug agents even at the local level. There's, you know, here in Maine we have the state MDEA, there's a federal DEA that operates out of Maine, but a lot of communities such as Westbrook, Portland, some of the bigger cities, Lewiston, have drug officers that actually investigate these crimes and go into these, you know, communities and try to weed out the drug dealers. So why is this actually hurting our communities, and why is legalizing drugs the answer?
Well, the situation we exist is almost similar to the situation that happened with alcohol prohibition. If you remember, back in 1920, we banned alcohol. We instituted alcohol prohibition because we knew how dangerous alcohol was to our society. And then 13 years later, we legalized alcohol. Now, we didn't legalize it in 33 because we determined that it really wasn't dangerous. We made a mistake. We legalized it in 33 knowing the same thing we did in 1920, and that was how dangerous alcohol was. But what we realized in 13 years is alcohol did not create people like Al Capone. Prohibition of alcohol created people like Al Capone and funded a huge underground marketplace, because even if we banned it, people still chose to use that particular drug. And we're seeing the same phenomenon over and over again. In a study done in New York City by the federal government on drug-related violence determined that 25% of the violence created by drugs in New York City during that year was created by the use and abuse of these drugs. On the other hand, 75% of the violence was associated with what they used in their study, the term marketplace disputes. And most of the violence that we call drug-related violence, that drug-related violence on the Mexican border, is not really drug-related, it's drug business-related. You know, they sell morphine in Mexico and they sell heroin in Mexico. There's nobody shooting it out around the pharmacies where they sell the legal morphine. The only place you find the violence is in the underground marketplace. And we are actually stimulating the violence. It is when I was in police work, I spent 20 years in law enforcement. Drug enforcement was the only aspect of my job where when I did my job, it actually made no difference. I don't know how long you've been in the reporting business, but I'm sure you've reported on the drug bust, and this will be able to put a big dent in the drug problem, but there's never any dent. The business just keeps rolling on because there's just too much money in the underground marketplace.
Now, Peter, are you talking, advocating that all drugs be legal from, you know, heroin on down, or are you talking just about, you know, the marijuana and the kind of, you know, entry-level drugs, as they call them?
Well, I'll answer that a way that one of our speakers, a gentleman by the name of Jerry Cameron, he's a retired police chief from down in Florida, he answers that question this way. He says, it's easy. Whichever drugs you once sold on the street corners of your community by 14-year-old children, you keep that drug illegal, and that's the one that they'll be selling. I don't want 14-year-olds selling the drugs on the streets of my community or your community or any community in America. Therefore, we have to legalize and regulate all of them, not just marijuana.
Now, do you believe at all on any level that we'll have just an addicted society when you open the door to legalize drugs, that more people will use them? Is that an argument? I know, you know, with alcohol, people are going to use it, or if they're going to use it. Do you really believe that that's the way it is for drugs, or is there any type of, you know, basis to the argument that if you make it illegal, you'll prevent people from actually using them?
Well, I think we've kind of proven that we're not really preventing people from using it in the first place. And secondly, when we legalized alcohol, the big scare was, and the people that wanted to keep prohibition going, was that everybody will become a drunk. You know, if we legalize alcohol, everybody will become a drunk. Well, that simply did not happen. And in fact, we legalized it at the beginning of the Great Depression when people didn't really need a reason to drink. There was a reason to drink just because they weren't working. But yet they didn't do it. We still had the same percentage. About 10% of the people who use alcohol became addicted. That never changed. So no, I don't think there will be a big increase. And the other aspect of this thing, when you have an underground market, it's kind of hard to judge whether there's an increase or not because we have no idea how many people are using illegal drugs in this society. You know, we do surveys. Hi, I'm from the federal government. What illegal drugs have you used? Kind of tough to get an honest answer to that question. So I think we'll see, if we legalize it tomorrow, I think we'll have the appearance of an increase in use, but that'll just mean that these people became visible to us, and then we can start working on it. You know, the most addictive drug we have in our society, nicotine, we've cut the adult use of that drug by 50% over the last 10 years. People have given up smoking. And we did that without burning any tobacco fields or without arresting any tobacco growers. We did it through education. Right. Telling people how dangerous it was. That's what works.
Okay, Peter Christ from the organization. He's the co-founder of LEAP Law Enforcement, advocating against the prohibition. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you, Joyce, sharing your audience with me.
Okay. Thanks, Peter.